Welcome to Chapter 6 of Infectious Disease, where we're going to learn about the beneficial aspects of microbes and all the wondrous help that they give us before we learn, for the rest of the semester, about how they can cause disease and harm us. The first advantage that microbes provide us is that they are important contributors to environmental ecology. They, in fact, form most of the cycle of life all on their own. Many bacteria are decomposers, which are organisms that can take waste products and dead materials, such as leaf debris or dead organisms, and convert them into inorganic materials that can be used again by producers. Producers are organisms that can take non-living energy sources, such as the sun or rocks, and convert them into organic energy sources, such as sugars and fats. Producers most people think of are plants, but in fact, there's many bacteria that are producers as well. Cyanobacteria, that we learned about in previous chapters, also photosynthesize and can convert carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to sugar that can be used by many living things on Earth. Then, microbes in turn take these organic materials from producers and consumers and convert them back to inorganic sources such as carbon dioxide that can be used again. Bacteria, in fact, are the basis of many biogeochemical cycles. These are processes involved in the recycling of carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, iron, and phosphorus, and are involved in the return of these elements to the non-living features of our planet, such as the atmosphere and soils, for reuse by living things again later. Let's briefly talk about two of these, the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. The carbon cycle is comprised of carbon atoms that move from living things to non-living things and back again. Carbon is an essential part of our living systems and are in fact found in many of the molecules of our cells and all of our macromolecules, including proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and DNA. The carbon cycle begins with producers photosynthesizing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and converting inorganic carbon dioxide to organic molecules, such as sugars and fats. Producers are often associated as plants, but as mentioned, can include algae of the eukaryotic type and cyanobacteria, which are prokaryotic algae. These sugars and fats that producers make are then used by the producers and also consumers and decomposers in aerobic cellular respiration to convert the sugars into ATP, and in the process, these organisms release the sugars and fats as carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, completing the carbon cycle. There's also the nitrogen cycle. Now, while the carbon cycle, as you can see from this picture, has as its core drawing down the carbon dioxide in the inorganic state to living systems, the producers are comprised of many organisms, eukaryotic, prokaryotic, and even multicellular plants. The nitrogen cycle, on the other hand, draws down nitrogen gas from the atmosphere in this inorganic state through one source alone, and that is bacteria and cyanobacteria. These nitrogen fixers are the only organisms that can take the inorganic nitrogen gas in the atmosphere and convert it to other forms that can be used by living systems. So the nitrogen cycle at its core requires bacteria. The nitrogen cycle is essential because nitrogen is used in many macromolecules of the cell, including proteins and nucleic acids such as DNA and RNA. Nitrogen gas, N2, is the most common gas in our atmosphere, accounting for 80% of our atmospheric gases. So a vast majority of our planet's atmosphere is made of nitrogen gas. And we need access to this so that we can obtain this nitrogen for use in our proteins and DNA. These nitrogen-fixing bacteria are so important for living systems, and they engage in this nitrogen fixation through a complex process involving symbiosis with leguminous plants. Legumes are bean plants, so plants such as alfalfa sprouts, peanuts, soybeans, peas, and so forth. These bacteria live in the soil all over the world and are called rhizobium. The rhizobium bacteria interact with the leguminous plants and form bumps on their roots called nodules. These nodules are an anaerobic environment that the plants have created for the bacteria, and in these anaerobic nodules, the bacteria can then engage in nitrogen fixation, converting nitrogen gas into ammonia. The next phase of the nitrogen cycle is called nitrification. And in nitrification, ammonia or ammonium is converted into nitrates, or NO3. The nitrates can then be used by plants directly, as can the ammonia or ammonium. The conversion of ammonia or ammonium into nitrates is done by two different genera of bacteria, the Nitrobacter and Nitrosomonas. These two genera are playing an essential role in carrying out the processes of further nitrogen conversion into additional forms that can be used by living things. As you can see, unlike the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle requires bacteria at multiple levels in order to function fully in our ecosystems. Finally, to complete the nitrogen cycle, there are denitrifying bacteria in our soils that can convert these nitrogen compounds back into nitrogen gas in the atmosphere once again. However, it's not just for ecosystems and the general function of our planet and its living things that require bacteria. In fact, there are microbes that are required for food and industry as well. Let's next talk about microbes in food. There are, of course, lots of microbes that we consume on a daily basis. The most obvious of these are mushrooms that you might have with a salad or a hamburger or steak. There are many different species of mushrooms that we eat in the world. However, it is important to be careful and cautious that if you do try to go mushroom hunting, that you are very careful to not pick and consume the dangerous species of mushrooms that contain toxins. These dangerous species of mushrooms can be toxic to the point of death, with no support that hospitals can provide in the form of treatment or curing of the toxins. It's important to recognize that the death cap mushroom is in fact very innocuous looking and looks similar to most non-toxic mushrooms. It is also increasing in its growth range all over the world. And every year, more and more people are accidentally consuming the death cap mushroom, and increasing numbers of people are dying from it. However, if consuming the right mushrooms, the benefits of mushroom consumption are numerous. Studies have shown them to be beneficial as antimicrobial agents, anti-cholesterol agents, stimulants of cognitive function, a vitamin source, and also lowering blood sugar levels. So as long as you're consuming non-toxic mushrooms, they can be very helpful. Other microbes used in food production and food consumption include algae. This is the type of algae that you may have in sushi, but also chlorella, which you may consume in powder form in fruit smoothies. In addition to that, nori is a type of algae that is consumed by many cultures in Asia. And in China in particular, people consume more than 70 different species of algae. It's very nutritious, and it's just like eating plants that you would find on land, like spinach or chard. But microbes are also used in the production of many other foods as well. People have used microbes for the production of fermented foods for thousands of years. Fermentation is the process of taking sugars and breaking them down into smaller molecules, such as lactic acid or ethanol and carbon dioxide, in the absence of oxygen. This is for the microbes to produce ATP, but the lactic acid and ethanol or carbon dioxide that's produced by the bacteria when they are in the absence of oxygen tends to be a very important food product that many people eat on a daily basis. So while fermentation is very inefficient for microbial growth, it's very advantageous for people. In particular, some of the foods that require fermentation include bread. Yeast, which are pictured here, can be used in the formation of leavened bread or bread that has risen with bubbles in the bread itself. Those bubbles are a result of fermentation producing ethanol and carbon dioxide from the yeast. The ethanol in bread is evaporated out during the baking process, but the carbon dioxide is the gas released that causes the bread to rise. Crackers are the same contents of bread, but don't contain yeast and are thus not allowed or not given the opportunity to rise and become soft and air-filled. Microbes are also used in the production of dairy products. There are many different types of dairy products where microbial growth is encouraged, and this is in the production of cheese and fermented milk beverages, such as yogurt, buttermilk, kefir, and others. Different species of Lactobacillus and Streptococcus are commonly used in the production of these different foods. Lactobacillus in particular is important in forming lactic acid, which is what gives yogurt, kefir, and buttermilk its tart flavor. Different cheeses use different types of microbes in order to generate different textures and flavors in the cheese. You can see, just by going to a cheese market, the variety of different types of microbes that are encouraged to grow and produce different forms of cheese. Lastly, there are microbes that are used for alcohol. Alcoholic fermentation is when the sugars from grapes or grains are used by yeast in the absence of oxygen to produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next section.